On this week's Fanco Wrestling Show, I predict the return of Nick Suriano and discuss other missing All-Americans. Plus, stick around as I talk about which freshmen could actually get on the podium this season. Can any of them actually win an NCAA title? Let's stop stalling and start talking wrestling. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to the Fanco Wrestling Show right here on YouTube, or you may be listening on the Apple Podcast, which we are recently on the Apple Podcast Store. And in fact, we actually just recently did a giveaway, giving away 2 channel memberships right here on YouTube with exclusive Fanco Wrestling emojis. And I want to give a shout out to June and Kenny, who wrote reviews on the Fanco Wrestling Show and won the giveaway. So thank you for supporting the show, and if you feel so inclined that you enjoy the Fanco Wrestling Show, please feel free to leave us a review on the Apple Podcast platform. I'll be honest with you, I want to grow to become one of the biggest wrestling podcasts on YouTube, and as well as on Apple Podcasts. And the way to do that is through review. So I appreciate your support, and let's get into today's show because there is so much to discuss, like the Freshmen All-Americans, like the underrated teams, which I'll get to in a bit. And I have a little bit of a funny story about Daton Fix, which you may be interested in hearing. So first of all, I want to talk about some underrated teams this season. And I don't know, these are just teams that have been kind of flying under the radar. One of these teams, the first one I do want to discuss is Mizzou. So I'll be honest, like maybe you don't consider them an underrated team. Some people did actually up until last week. And for me, they were just kind of flying under the radar. But Mizzou is a team that is 7-0 right now. They're undefeated, have more wins under their belt than more teams even have matches. I mean, there just hasn't been a crazy ton that's been happening this season, so it's great that Mizzou has been able to actually, compete this season this much. So they have wins over Central Michigan, Northern Iowa, Iowa State, which their most recent win over Iowa State was a solid thumping, 31-7 win, and 3 ranked guys in the top 8. A couple other teams I want to discuss before we get into some of the other topics in this podcast is North Carolina. UNC, I think it's kind of been being shifted out of the ACC just because they're not in people's sights right now. And I think that's the big reason why they're not ranked ahead of some of these other teams is because they haven't really had the chance to wrestle a lot of these other teams because they've been kind of plagued with COVID that's been going through the program, unfortunately, with some of the recent announcements they've been putting out on Twitter, their recent postponements of matches. They've only been able to wrestle, I think Gardner Webb is all they've been able to wrestle. So it's kind of unfortunate. But they have 7 guys in the top 25, including Austin O'Connor, Devin Kane, Clay Lott, as well as Kennedy Monday. And listen, I wanted to see the Virginia Tech and UNC duel last week. Unfortunately, we were not able to get that match, but hopefully we see that soon because I think that UNC could actually be better than a Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech's a tough team as well. Another underrated team I want to talk about is Purdue. Purdue is 1-0 right now, so okay, not crazy, but with the Big Ten, with a lot of these tough schools in the Big Ten, you had the Iowas, you had the Penn States, you have the Ohio States, or at least, Illinois now, considering the fact that Illinois just beat Ohio State in quite a duel last weekend. If you're interested in hearing that review, I actually have the recap up on the channel talking about the Illinois and Ohio State duel, but Purdue kind of gets overlooked in the Big Ten. They just crushed Northwestern 28-8. And their next tough battle is, like I actually just mentioned this team, is Illinois. They will be wrestling Illinois, who just beat Ohio State. They also have Wisconsin, who they will be wrestling on Sunday, who's another tough Big Ten team. Purdue is a team that has Devin Schroeder, a top 5 ranked wrestler, Parker Filius, a top 20 ranked wrestler, Griffin Perriott, as well as Kendall Coleman. And one guy who I'll be discussing later in this show is a Purdue freshman, and that is Garrett Ninehouse, who went to the high school where I went to, and I look forward to seeing his name in the upcoming season. I think he's going to do very well. And then Navy. Navy just upset the number 18 team in Lehigh, and for whatever reason, the coaches poll, they're just getting no respect. I don't understand why. They had a heck of a duel with Pitt. I mean, they almost beat Pitt if a couple matches went their way. They just they didn't put it to Lehigh, but like they had just a gritty battle against Lehigh. And they're just still sitting outside of the coaches poll rankings. It's crazy to me. With Tribus, with Schedule, with Kozer, and Cherniglia as a ranked freshman, should be ranked. Actually, she should be ranked soon as Indra Cherniglia. But I think the thing that Navy will be looking out for here with underrated teams, they got to get the win against Army. If they beat Army, who I believe right now is ranked in the top 25, I mean, Navy hasn't beat Army in the last couple, I think maybe 4 or 5 duels. And that's the big opponent. If you know anything about Navy, you know anything about Army, Navy and Army, they are some of the biggest rivals in sports. And if Navy beats Army this season, wow, that's going to be huge for the program. Now, let's talk about some other things this show, because there is, like I said, quite a bit to talk about. So let's move on to the next segment, which is a Fanco 5. And we're talking about the 5 craziest upsets of this past week. You may have missed a couple of the craziest upsets this last week because there was a lot that happened in wrestling this weekend. So darn much. I mean, between the dual meet upsets with Iowa and Nebraska, I mean, that wasn't an upset. That was just a crazy duel. But between Navy and Lehigh, between Illinois and Ohio State, those were the crazy upsets, I should say. But the individual upsets, what did you miss? First, I want to talk about some honorable mentions, and these are some of the honorable mentions right here, some tough matches. One, Thomas Buller's kind of putting on, he's had a couple of rough losses recently, including to Jake Keating of Virginia. But there are a couple other, tough guys here, with Bronigal beating Rocky Jordan, and then Chris Weiler returning the favor, beating Zach Bronigal. So some tough honorable mention matches. But let's talk about these top 5. And the first one I want to talk about here is with number 5 in Holden Heller of Hofstra. So not a school you hear a whole ton about, but Hofstra pinned number 7 Marcus Hartman of Army. He beat him in the duel, and this is after Hofstra had 2 dual meets canceled due to COVID-related things. But now he comes out here ready, full of fire, full of fuel, takes down Marcus Hartman, and then was able to work over a turn and pin Marcus Hartman in the first period. He is now, he was previously unranked, is now number 21 in the country. I'm going off of Flow Wrestling rankings. Of course, these change no matter where you are. But Hartman is somebody who made an impact at Midlands. He had wins over Quincy Monday. This is kind of where he piqued my interest. I saw him at Midlands, and there was just so much excitement for Marcus Hartman at Midlands. He also beat Anthony Artolona at Midlands and really got into the rankings from there. And the fact that Holden Heller was able to pull off this pin and beat Hartman was an impressive victory. And please, before I go on any further, talking next about Brody Teskey's stellar weekend, let me know what your favorite matches of the weekend were. Whether they were upsets or not, I just want to hear what your favorite matches of this past weekend were. So, I mentioned Brody Teskey. Brody Teskey had a stellar weekend. He had wins over Alex Mackel and Connor Brown, 2 top 25 wins. That has propelled him now into the rankings, and Brody Teskey is now a top 25 ranked wrestler, as he deserves to be. He deserves to be in that top 25 spot because of his excellent wins here. So let's talk a little bit about Brody Teskey's wins. First of all, his decision against Connor Brown, who he forced into sudden victory. So this was like a high-scoring match, 12-10, in which Teskey was able to get the match over in sudden victory. You see Teskey here from a couple weeks ago where he was wrestling and got a pin, but I mean, he is somebody who transferred from Penn State and is finally get his showing. The Iowa State champ is finally going to get his showing, and I think this is the time that he's going to do it. Beating Connor Brown, forced it overtime, able to get the takedown at the end of the third period and then get the takedown in overtime. And then against Alex Mackel, who Mackel was beating him up until the third period, whenever Teskey was able to force a couple of stall calls and get a couple of points there, and then ultimately got the takedown in the final seconds of the match, similar to his Connor Brown match. We'll see if that continues to happen, if that trend continues to happen with Brody Teskey. But an impressive win and earned him Big 12 Wrestler of the Week. He's now a top 10 ranked wrestler. I know the Northern Iowa fans are going to be super excited about that. And the next one, if you're a Missouri fan, you were probably psyched over the weekend. So Mizzou has Alan Hart, who bumped up from 133 last year, is now at 141, wrestled Ian Parker over the weekend of Iowa State and beat him 7-4. An excellent win. Alan Hart who I saw for the first time, I believe, was at maybe the Southeast Open last year. Was where he wrestled, and he had a good showing there, but nothing crazy. But now he's really starting to make his showing in the world of wrestling right now, with wins at South Dakota State, Oregon State, Northern Iowa. He's undefeated on the season thus far, and we'll see if he continues to do that. And he also, not only did he beat Ian Parker of Iowa State, but he tore up the Northern Iowa kid with a tech fall. He also had a pin earlier on in the season. He's now a top 5 ranked wrestler right now by Flow Wrestling, so that's impressive. And the one that most people will be psyched about, the number 2 biggest upset of last weekend, was, in my opinion, was Nelson Brands. Nelson Brands beating Taylor Venz. And Venz, unfortunately, because I like Taylor Venz. I enjoy watching him wrestle. I enjoy watching Nebraska wrestle. I'm a big Nebraska fan as well. But Taylor Venz has kind of been that guy in the past year, former All-American, that guys have just been able to upset. Abe Assad, Nelson Brands. You look at Penn State's guy. These guys are just able to upset, with the Aaron Brooks win. Like I said, Penn State's guy able to get wins over Taylor Venz. Like, Taylor Venz has got to step it up. But he didn't look great that match, and Nelson Brands did. Nelson Brands did look good that match, able to continue on the scoring, and gets the first takedown right away, and then just continues to attack Taylor Venz. He scored off of his reattacks a lot, off of Venz's reattacks, which I think was some of the best takedowns that he actually had were those takedowns. And the other thing I say is, like, he broke Venz. Nelson Brands broke Venz in the last 30 seconds of the match whenever he just let him up and ended up taking him down again to get the major decision to end the match with an impressive victory by Nelson Brands. And the most exciting and the best upset of last weekend, had to be Luke Luffman of Illinois. And not only did Illinois upset Ohio State, but Luke Luffman had a couple of wins on the weekend against Trent Hilger of Wisconsin, who he beat in a tiebreaker in the sudden victory, as well as Tate Orndorff of Ohio State, who he beat 3-2. Now, the Orndorff match, you just saw that takedown right there. That was the only takedown of the match, so it wasn't like a crazy good performance, but it was an upset win for an unranked Luke Luffman. And the fact that he got that, is impressive. The rest of the match from there was, it was a typical heavyweight match, which honestly to me is not always that exciting. But Luke Luffman did end up getting the win, and ultimately got the best upset of last weekend. So what was your favorite upset? Please let me know down in the comments below. And that moves us on to the second topic of the day. And the next topic of the day is about Nick Suriano. So let's talk a little bit about Nick Suriano. So I'm wondering, did Rutgers just reveal that Nick Suriano is going to return? Now, first, before I get into I'll tell you why exactly I think this might be happening. And yeah, it is a little bit of a conspiracy theory, if you want to throw that out there. But, one, do you think Nick Suriano will return? Drop a comment right now if you think Nick Suriano is going to return for Rutgers this season. So Suriano started the season as the number 1 ranked wrestler at 133 pounds, and I think the only source or the only news outlet that still has him ranked is actually Track Wrestling, because most sources have kind of heard that maybe he's not returning or he just hasn't shown up, so he's not going to be wrestling. Now, he has been wrestling freestyle. He just recently won the Deglaine over in France, the gold medal. He won in a bracket with Thomas Gilman and Vito Arujau. Put on an excellent performance, was Nick Suriano. But I want to talk about this and the college implications. So Nick Suriano, about a month ago, maybe even less than that, wasn't even listed on Rutgers' roster on the website. Just wasn't listed. And then recently, I just noticed this the other day. He was listed on the roster on the website at 133 pounds, Nick Suriano. You see right there. Now, the first thing to note is he's wearing something a little bit different than the other guys in the lineup. So, obviously he probably missed a picture day. He wasn't able to be there for media day and photos. So, he's out. And that makes sense because he has been training out in Arizona at the Sunkist Kids Wrestling Club. He's just been wrestling out there. So, that's not a crazy thing. It's okay, he's on the roster, okay, big deal. But here's the other thing is I looked a little bit more into Nick Suriano's profile to see maybe there was something else and that would be there. And this is what I found. The change on the website says that Nick Suriano will begin the season wrestling freestyle. That's it. Will begin the season wrestling freestyle. So what does that mean? Well, it can mean a couple things. And let's be honest about a couple things. Just because something's on the website that he will begin freestyle, and like the most obvious thing is like he will begin freestyle, meaning he could return to college wrestling. Nick Suriano could return and wrestle in college this year. That's the first main thing. The next thing is he will begin, but maybe he'll end the season wrestling freestyle too, right? He may never return. Like, we just don't really know. The phrase that they have up there, and that's it. Like, there's nothing else they have there. They just said he started this preseason ranked number 1, and he will begin the season wrestling freestyle. So, maybe I'm reading into this a little bit more than I should, but it's something that wasn't there before. And you shouldn't always trust like every single thing that's on the team website, because not all of that is always accurate, but it's just something interesting that I noticed here. Now, if he does return, which to me, like, this is something that's showing positives that Nick Suriano will return. And I'll tell you the negative of why he might not return, but the positives right now, I think that because this is shown on the website, if he does return, he's going to need 4 matches in order to get ranked in the coaches' rankings and then ultimately qualify for NCAAs, depending on, conference championships and everything that happens there. So if that does happen, I think that the probable return for Nick Suriano will be on February 6th against Indiana, Nebraska, and Michigan State. This will start Nick Suriano out on a path to get 4 wins before the season ends, before the conference championships. And I think that will be a good start for Nick Suriano, because then they'll have one more match on February 19th versus Maryland, and then Big Ten's on March 6th, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a chance that Nick Suriano could actually return this season. Now, the negative, and this is a good point that was brought up on Flow Wrestling Radio Live the other day, I was listening to, is Christian Piles he brought up a point on FRL saying that there's a chance, due to like everything that Suriano may be seeing. He just came back. And he, won the freestyle tournament over in France. And then he sees everything that's going on with college wrestling, with a lot of these postponements and cancellations. And Christian Piles said, like, he may not even want to return to the Rutgers room if he's seeing all these negative things that are happening with COVID. So, like, he doesn't want his training to get interrupted. Any training disruptions could hurt him. And I kind of agree that with Piles that could happen. So, anyways, like, do you think I'm reading into this too much? Or do you think that Nick Suriano may actually return this season? Speaking of crazy wrestlers that have been missing, let's talk about some of these missing wrestlers. So, there are a couple ranked wrestlers that have just been completely absent this season. One of those being Nick Suriano. Michael Kemmer is another one. Daton Fix. I'm going to talk about each of these guys and why they're missing. There's been some coaches have said why each of these guys are missing, and makes a little bit of sense. But like, when also could we be seeing the return of these guys? So the first guy I have to talk about is Michael Kemmer, who missed this past weekend, the opening weekend of Iowa in Nebraska. Kemmer did not wrestle Labriola. There was a lot of disappointment. The 2-time All-American did not wrestle against Michael Labriola, who had a crazy close match the last time that these guys wrestled. Were you upset that you didn't see Michael Kemmer wrestle? I know I was. So Brand said this to NCAA. He said that Kemmer was out of Iowa. He sat out for precautionary reasons. Now, that's the plain vanilla response that, like, okay, that could literally mean anything. That could mean anything, precautionary reasons. Maybe he was a little banged up. Maybe he was a little bit injured. Definitely, is possible. And he does have that recurring injury. So, like, I think that's the one I'm most likely to buy. I don't think that he was dodging. I honestly don't think that was the case here. But he's likely to return against Minnesota this weekend, and we'll see if that happens. The next guy who's been missing is Ryan Deacon. Now, Deacon is another guy who I don't believe was actually dodging this weekend. Deacon is actually expected to wrestle against Maryland and Nebraska. He's a clear number 1 ranked guy at 157 right now. He's obviously going to have some competition with David Carr, with Hayden Hiley, but there hasn't really been anything said about Deacon and where he's been. But, if he does return against Maryland and Nebraska, I think there will be some easy wins for Deacon, and I don't think there's anything to worry about. He'll be back. The All-American will be back and will be willing to defend his number one spot. And then we get into, some other interesting guys, and with Michigan guys, and Miles Amin and Stefan Micic. So Micic, both these guys actually took Olympic red shirts last year and are expected to return soon. There's really very much similarities between these two guys and like where they've been and why they'll be back. Wrestled some freestyle, but will they make their debuts? I'd be interested in like soon. I mean, will they make their debuts soon? I'd be willing to bet that Micic may be wrestling against Iowa in an upcoming duel, Iowa and Illinois. That'd be a great comeback duel for him to be able to wrestle with DeSanto at 133. I'd love to see that, as well as a solid duel against Illinois. We haven't seen, actually, a lot of these top guys at 33 compete, like Micic, Suriano, or Daton Fix, and I'll be talking about Daton Fix in just a second. But then Miles Amin, who there's some interesting things. I was actually listening to The First Word, which is Willie Saylor's podcast over on Matt Scouts on Rockfin. He actually believes that Miles Amin will start the season at 197 pounds. He'll be bumping up to wrestle, which I found very interesting because he's listed at 184 right now. But if he does bump up to 197, he'll have some strong competition with Noah Adams, Eric Schultz, AJ Ferrari, Cam Caffey, Jacob Warner. I'd be interested in seeing the 3-time All-American bump up, and if he thinks that weight's maybe a bit more open for him to actually All-American again. I think he could All-American either way. I think he could actually win either weight, but depending on where he wants to be, we'll see if he's at 84 or 97. And then there are the two big questions. With Suriano, now, he's been competing in freestyle, Nick Suriano has, and the thing with Suriano is, he plays gold over in France, over at the Henry Deglaine, in a bracket with Vito Rougeau, as well as Thomas Gilman. He's in track wrestling, still has him ranked. Now, the interesting thing that I found is, like, on the Rutgers website says Suriano will begin the season wrestling freestyle, meaning maybe he does start wrestle this season, but I don't know where he'll be. Most rankings have taken him out of the rankings. They do not believe he will return. Most people do not believe he'll return to college wrestling, which is a shame. I would like to see him return to Rutgers, but, that's that. And then is the big one, is Daton Fix. So where's Daton Fix been? So Daton Fix, if you haven't been following Daton Fix news, was suspended through February 10th internationally, and it seems that has carried over to his institution at Oklahoma State. I'll be honest with you, I'm not completely sure that it does carry over, but it seems like that is the case. It's over a failed drug test, which he drank from his dad's water bottle in the refrigerator. If you followed anything on that story, you may know a little bit about that. But here's the interesting thing about Daton Fix, and I think you'll find this very funny. I found it very interesting. I've been doing some sleuthing recently, and you may know that NCAA wrestlers this year need 4 matches to qualify for the coaches' rankings, get in the coaches' rankings, and actually earn a spot or bid for the conference championship at NCAAs. So they need 4 matches. With Daton Fix, with his abbreviated schedule, he's still able to return this year, but there aren't any extra tournaments he can wrestle. There's nothing going on. And then I saw on Okie State's website is the only tournament I saw outside of the conference championships or NCAAs is the Cowboy Challenge Tournament, which is apparently happening on February 14th. It's like, okay, well, what's the big deal? So Okie State, Oklahoma, WVU, Mizzou, all expected to wrestle in this small tournament. The interesting thing about the dates is Daton Fix is suspended through February 10th and will likely be returning on February 14th. Now, I can't promise anything. I don't know anything differently, but it's just kind of funny that, like, this is when he's able to get his matches. It's smart on Okie State's coaches with John Smith. This is the way that they're able to actually get matches since the dual season is abbreviated. Not sure what's going to happen with conference championships and everything, but kind of interesting. And then they will have a duel against Oklahoma, I believe, on February 21st. So that's what's happening with Daton Fix and all of these other wrestlers. Do you expect any of these guys to return this season? And who are you looking most forward to seeing return? Please drop a comment down below. And let's get into the main topic of today's show, and that is the freshmen. These are 21 freshmen who could seriously All-American this year. And unfortunately, one of them dropped out due to a potential injury. So I guess it's 20 with an asterisk, but 21 wrestlers who could seriously All-American. So who was the most recent freshman All-American? Well, that was Mikhail Lewis, who wrestled at the last NCAA Wrestling Championships and won at 165 pounds, beating guys like Wick, Marinelli, Vincenzo Joseph, had a phenomenal tournament, and was somebody who was didn't do anything crazy at the beginning of the season. You know, he had good wins going into NCAAs, but NCAA is where he made his claim. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of these other freshmen could do the same thing this year, especially with, I mean, let's call it for what it is. There aren't as many guys in the wrestling this year because of COVID, because teams have been shut down, because teams have not been competing, because COVID may affect how guys compete. So, this is the year to do it. So let's start out at 125 pounds. Anything can happen here. Well, not really. I mean, anything under Spencer Lee could happen, okay? So Spencer Lee is going to be your top dog at 125. That is just seriously what's going to happen. You know, I made a video the other day talking about I think Spencer Lee may be able to bonus his way through the end of the season. I think that's a legitimate possibility. But I think the rest of the spots are pretty open. You know, you saw Brody Teske this weekend jump 20 spots in the rankings with his wins at 125 pounds over Alex Mackel and Connor Brown. I mean, Rayvon Foley dropped a loss to Pat McKee. It's wild at 125 this year. It's absolutely wild. So the first guy I want to talk about is Dylan Ragusin of Michigan, the true freshman, who had a phenomenal start to the season with a pin over Nick Aguilar of Rutgers, as well as a major decision over King Sandoval of Maryland. So Ragusin is somebody who has been on my radar, and I'm so pumped to see how he's going to do the rest of the season, because he just fills a hole for Michigan, and it's a great win for him, or a great chance for him to All-American. I really do believe that he will get on the podium this year. The next guy I want to discuss is Sam Latona of Virginia Tech, the true freshman, who had a good start to the season against Campbell. I saw him wrestle the Campbell match, WVU, as well as Kent State. And his big test this year, Sam Latona, the true freshman, who was a top 15 ranked wrestler, is going to be against NC State's Jacob Camacho, who's a top dog in the ACC. I look for Latona, especially if he can get that win over Camacho, or at least have a close match showing that he's right there. I look for him to possibly get on the podium. And I'm not saying every single one of these guys are going to get on the podium. That'd be ridiculous if we got 21 All-Americans. It'd be 21 Freshmen All-Americans. It'd be insane. I don't know if that has ever happened to get that many Freshmen All-Americans, but these guys can get on the podium, right? And Trevor Mastrogiovanni is another one of those guys that can get on the podium. But Oklahoma State is just absolutely stacked with freshmen. The true freshman was a top 15 wrestler in the Fanco 50 this past year, a 3-time New Jersey State champion. That's why he's there. And he's had solid wins this season, but nothing too big that I'm crazy impressed by. Some solid wins. He'll have an upcoming test against Alex Mackel, who is coming off of a tough loss, and so he'll be looking to rebound. But if he gets a tough match with Alex Mackel, if Mastrogiovanni can win that, I think we're going to see a big jump from Mastro this season and getting on the podium. And the last guy at 125 I want to mention is Robbie Howard of Penn State, the true freshman. You always have to keep an eye out for true freshmen at Penn State. Now, the weight 125 has kind of been plagued for Penn State, unfortunately, in the past. But the 2-time New Jersey State champion could start for Penn State and, prove to be well depending on how we see him. Now, at 33 and 41, I actually don't think there are going to be any freshman All-American. Those weights are pretty stacked, especially 33, but I just don't think there are any freshmen that are there right now that are able to get on the podium. Maybe somebody will prove me wrong. Maybe it's like a Mikhail Lewis comes out of nowhere, but I just don't really see that happening. But at 49, this is a tough weight. I mean, it's also going to be a tough weight class to break into, though. It's top loaded with juniors and seniors. I think that's the toughest part, all in the top 8. With Sasso, Austin O'Connor, Mahler, Llewellyn, Deegan, and Murin. It's a tough weight to crack. But if there were a couple guys that could do it, who would be the guys? One is Jaden Abbas of Stanford, the redshirt freshman, is 23-4 last season, a scuffle champ, a Reno TOC champ. His best win was over Andrew Alvarez of Northern Colorado, not North Carolina, of Northern Colorado is Andrew Alvarez, who's been a great treat to watch wrestle. The other guy I want to mention here at 149 who had a amazing start of the season, it was Brock Hardy. And maybe you don't want to say amazing because he did have the loss to Max Murin. Just couldn't defend Max Murin's shots in the duel against Iowa. But Brock Hardy was, I mean, he's a little bit older of a freshman. He was just on a 2-year mission trip and is returning. Started the season out with a win over Michael Blockus, a 9-2 win. And it's, for any of these guys, it's going to be maybe even tougher for him. But the toughest part is going to be, the Big Ten with Sasso. With Mikey Carr, with Murin, Storr, Perriott, Verclaren, Yaya Thomas. The Big Ten is stacked with talent at 149 pounds. Is Brock Hardy the guy to break in there? If we see him do well again in some of these duels, we could see that happening. So at 157, just one guy here that I do want to mention that I think is of note is Chase Saldate of Michigan State, who was a top 10 in the Fanco 50 this past year, recent California State champ, Super 32 champ. Chase Saldate is just somebody excited to get behind. Now, he had a recent match against Brayton Lee, who's a top 10 ranked wrestler. He had a decision match. It was close match at 157, but although it was a loss, Saldate did lose to Brayton Lee, but Lee is also kind of growing into 157, so, we're still trying to get the hang of, how he's going to do at that weight, but Saldate is one of those guys. At 65, 65 has the most freshman talent. This is an exciting weight. I mean, it's the most freshman talent, but it's also one of the toughest to break into. With Mackay up top, I mean, this is to be, and let's also think about this before I even get into Mackay. Like, this is the weight where a freshman has notoriously won it recently. Remember when Vincenzo Joseph pulled off the crazy upset against Imar in NCAA finals? Mackay Lewis ends up beating Vincenzo Joseph. That was a crazy match. And now could another freshman do it? I don't know this year with Mackay, Marinelli, Griffith, Valencia, Whitlake. I mean, maybe a freshman could crack into the bottom half against a Wenzel, a Schedule, or a Bronigal, but I don't know about anybody winning it here. Joe Lee is one of the guys, first guy from Penn State, redshirt freshman. I think, I wanted to mention him, but I think he's going to struggle a little bit. He in 2019, he actually wrestled Whitlake. He wrestled Bullard. Bullard, who I believe he's had a couple recent unfortunate losses, but he's wrestled those guys, but he lost to them. But he did have a win over Jake Wenzel, who kind of had a breakout end of the season, which I think is important to note. So Joe Lee's somebody I wanted to talk about. The next guy I want to talk about is this guy right here, and that's Andrew Sparks of Minnesota, the true freshman, the California State champion, who started the season out with a big win over Peyton Robb to start the season, as well as a win over Michigan State's Jacob Tucker. But my question about Sparks is, how is he going to do against the elite guys? How is he going to do against a Marinelli, who will be tested against this weekend? How will he do against the Bronigal of Illinois, which is another upcoming match? How is he going to do against those guys? If he gives them a battle, okay. I mean, I'm all in on Sparks. He excited me. He piqued my interest. Now keep it. Let's see how he is going to actually do. And then let's talk about Cam Amin. And like I said, 165 is stacked. 165 is absolutely stacked with freshman talent. Cam Amin, he's good, but I think the one thing that's different about Cam Amin compared to a lot of the rest of these guys is going to be momentum from his team. And what I mean by that is the fact that he's surrounded by an exciting program this year. He's just full of, with Miles Amin up at 84 or 97, with Miles Amin, as well as Micic, as well as, Michigan is just loaded with talent, and when you get that momentum going, you just get a lot of the other guys on your team just more excited about winning, and I think Cam Amin maybe could be able to break into that, especially if Michigan starts making a run at a national title, and they need Cam Amin to start getting some points. You could see a whole different ballgame. I truly believe in momentum. Please let me know if you actually believe in momentum. I think it's a legitimate thing that holds a lot of weight. But the next guy, if you're a Missouri guy, you want to talk about Keegan O'Toole. O'Toole, top 10 in the Fanco 50, 4-time Missouri State champ, still unranked right now. Because he has had no big wins. I've seen a lot of people in the comments on forums kind of talking about why O'Toole isn't in the rankings yet. It's because he hasn't had any big wins. Now, he's had impressive wins with 2 pins, with 3 tech falls, and 83% bonus point percentage right now. I think O'Toole is somebody to watch out for. He's like just on the cusp of being in the rankings, but O'Toole is somebody to look out for, especially with an impressive team like Mizzou this year. The next guy I want to talk about, and this is a personal thing, but also I think he's a solid wrestler. Garrett Ninehouse of Purdue was top 15 in the Fanco 50. Comes from my high school, Cannon McMillan High School. Is at Purdue right now. He hasn't wrestled yet, but the two-time PIAA state champion has given guys like you may know Carter Sirachi a run for his money. Wrestled him in the Powerade finals, wrestled him at PIAAs. Ninehouse ended up winning a two-time PIAA in the state championships. Ninehouse is somebody to look out for sure this year. I'll just say that. He'll be somebody to look out for. And speaking of Carter Sirachi, at 174, 174 is going to be tough to break into, okay? Kemmer, with Michael Kemmer at the top, Logan Massa, Mike Labriola, I mean, it's going to be tough for somebody to win. But I think the 5 and 8 are open for the taking. But if you want to talk about the one guy who I think legitimately has a shot to win an NCAA title, it's Carter Sirachi. Carter Sirachi, the two-time PIAA state champ, has been crushing people in the offseason, crushing those Rockland matches against Chance Marceller, against Bullard, recent win. I mean, he was 19-0 last season, was a Southern Scuffle champion, and is just a complete Penn State wrestler, bonus point scorer, that the type of scoring that I love to see, the type of wrestling I love to watch. If anybody can win an NCAA title, I think he has the best shot. Now, can he beat guys like Kemmer or Labriola? I mean, we'll see. We'll see how the dual meet does. Maybe he makes an impressive debut against those guys, but we'll see what happens there. The next guy I do want to discuss is another Purdue guy, actually, and Solon. Emil Solon is a top 15 ranked guy. Had a good win against Northwestern to start the 2021 season. And, it's just somebody I want to mention who I think could potentially get on the podium this year as a freshman. And the next guy who had an impressive start to the season is Trey Muniz of Arizona State. So Muniz actually started out the season with a solid win over Anthony Mantanona and rode him out for 3 minutes on top. He had some nice takedowns, rode him out for 3 minutes on top. It was 13-2 as a redshirt freshman. He placed the Reno Tournament Champions. Muniz is somebody I think you should watch out for, a top 20 ranked wrestler. He's going to have to do something better, to get into those rankings, beat somebody real good. But Mantanona is a impressive start for Trey Muniz. Dustin Plott is another guy. I mean, Oklahoma State is just loaded with the freshmen, and I think Okie State can do well this year. I really do at NCAAs. But in the future, in the next 2-3 years, they're going to get some things rolling again. Is Oklahoma State. Plott is a top 50, Fanco 50 ranked freshman coming from the class of 2020, and a two-time Oklahoma State champion and Fargo All-American. Right now, he's undefeated at 4-0. No big wins, so nothing significant to talk about. He's still unranked, but I did want to throw him into, as we're talking about the freshman conversation and freshmen you can watch, that's somebody we had to talk about. At 184, I think that this can be an open weight. I think that there's possibility for guys to break in at 184 pounds. And one of the guys that can do it is John Poznansky of Rutgers, who is a top 15 ranked in the Fanco 50, New Jersey state champion. He has a win over Michigan this season, but he's really going to be tested against Rocky Jordan this weekend. And Jordan, not that I think Jordan is going, the elite of the elite. I mean, he's an amazing wrestler, but it's a good, solid victory if Poznansky can get that. We'll see what happens. I'll say we'll see what happens. At 197, I think this is the most open weight class. This is the most open weight class for somebody to win it. I still think it's a very loaded weight class, and for 197, which just speaking straight with you, is not one of my favorite weight classes. It's just not. But I think it can be a weight class that somebody can win. I mean, a freshman could win, with Noah Adams, J.A.L.O., Eric Schultz, Jacob Warner, Nino Bodacorsi, Cam Caffey. I mean, this is just absolutely a loaded weight class. Now, Michael Beard of Penn State is somebody who I think could do well this year. He was 25-3 while in college so far with his gray shirt, red shirt deal going on. He has wins over Dakota Gear. That was down at 184, as well as a win over Greg Bozak, who's a top 25 ranked wrestler. Michael Beard's somebody to watch out for. He's done well kind of the freestyle circuit in high school. He's on the edge for me. I think that he could get on the podium, but I'm interested in seeing it. And this is the guy, the next guy. Okay. this is what everybody is talking about. This is what everybody wants to hear is who could win a title at 197. A.J. Ferrari of Oklahoma State, who at many places had the number 1 ranked recruit coming in from the class of 2020. I had him as the number 3 ranked in the Fanco 50, a 2-time Texas State champion, kind of jumped all around to different high schools, but he stands a chance to win a title. He's kind of been hurt with a couple of injuries in the past recent years, but he has already his 2 major decisions, 2 tech falls on the season. And I think his real test, A.J. Ferrari, like he's had a great start to the season, but his real test is going to be against Noah Adams of West Virginia. These two could wrestle at the Cowboy Challenge tournament that's happening, I believe, on February 14th. Around that weekend is when that's going to happen. If Ferrari can, wrestle Adams, and I mean, if he can beat him, then holy cow, watch out NCAAs, watch out Big 12. I mean, Ferrari could be the real deal. I think he is. I think if you're like enjoy watching him, whether you're an Okie State fan or whether you're like somebody who's from Texas and watched him, you know that Ferrari's the real deal, and he'll be coming for an NCAA. I mean, at least an All-American this year. Like, and before I get to these last few guys, like, let me know. Comment right now which freshman maybe I missed. I know there's going to be somebody I missed, and you think, like, Josiah, why didn't you say this guy, or that guy? I get it, okay? But 21, these are 21 guys. Now, one of these guys, heavyweight is one of the most stacked weights this year. It's very top heavy. It's very loaded, no pun intended on the heavyweight side of that. But with Stevenson, with Paris, with Cassiope, it's going to be tough for somebody to break in there. Kirkfleet was going to be the guy I thought could do that. But right now, he's kind of rumored to be needing surgery, could be out for the year. It's kind of what we're hearing. And so unfortunate that, we may not be getting to see him this season. He was 9-0 last year, blowing through the Rockfin competition in the offseason. Is Greg Kirkfleet, a top 10 ranked wrestler, and somebody I believe was at least worth mentioning, even if we don't get to see him. And then Colton Schultz, the other heavyweight here of Arizona State, 3-0 on the season with a pin right now, 8-1 last year, and I think he just shows real promise for the 2021 season. And those are the 21 ranked freshmen. They're not all ranked, but the 21 freshmen who I think could actually make the podium in 2021. Who do you think is the best chance to win an NCAA title? For me, it's Carter Sirachi. I think that freshman had a chance. I don't know if he can beat a Kemmer or a Labriola, but we'll see. And that brings us into the upcoming duels this weekend. And the upcoming duels this weekend, right now, unfortunately, we have some postponements already. With Lehigh and Drexel, Okie State and Northern Colorado have already been canceled. I'm sure there will probably be more postponed by the time this ends, but I'm keeping positive. I'm keeping faithful that will not be the case. But Iowa and Minnesota could be happening this weekend. Should be a great one. Pitt and NC State, some good ACC competition. Purdue and Illinois could be a good one, as well as my favorite one that I'll be attending this weekend is App State and Campbell, a SoCon rival. If you're not watching, make sure you check that out. We're planning on streaming that to Facebook Live, so you can actually watch that match for free over on the Campbell Wrestling Facebook. That's going to be a heck of a duel with those SoCon rivals. So, I mean, just been back and forth the last couple of years. Campbell's been the better of them, but so psyched for that duel. If you can't tell, I'm psyched. Oklahoma, and Iowa State are supposed to wrestle this weekend, as well as Rutgers and Ohio State. And my favorite, Penn State, is going to potentially be making their debut against Michigan State this weekend. And so there's a lot to look forward to in wrestling this weekend. Even with the postponements, even with the unfortunate things happening that we can't foresee, there's still a lot to be excited about, and there's still a lot to discuss in the world of wrestling. Now, if you enjoyed this show, if you got some entertainment out of it, or you got some wrestling news out of it, I asked maybe you write a review about the Fanco Wrestling Show on the Apple Podcast. Whether you leave a 5-star review, a 4-star review, a 3-star, or maybe you hated it. Maybe you'll leave a 1-star review. I hope you didn't like this show, but you can at least give me that constructive criticism. But I would ask that you write a review of the Fanco Wrestling Show on Apple Podcasts. It's something that's really going to help this podcast continue to grow as this season goes on. There's been so much growth over on the Fanco Wrestling YouTube channel. And if you're not subscribed, I ask that you hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with the latest in wrestling news. But with everything going on this week with Daton Fix, with Nick Suriano, with all these freshmen, that was your wrestling news. My name is Josiah, and that was your wrestling news for this week.